How you doing, you fucking fart monkeys? This is Homework Gaming. It's day 7, August 26th, 2025. A little bit of work. Actually, yeah, no, normal amount of work for the night. It might take about an hour, maybe less. So I want to do a little reading and a little review of grammar rules. These are both for the class Dystopian Fiction. And there will be a quiz this Thursday about both the reading and the grammar rules. So I would like to do that, and I'd also like to study this a little bit. I might do this again tomorrow. Just do a little like review. But yeah, let's get right into the fucking bullshit. So this is Margaret Atwood's take on dystopian fiction. Writing with intent, right? So she wrote a book, right, so the Handmaid's Tale. She wrote The Handmaid's Tale, and basically people mistook it as sci-fi. And in this short reading, she explains why she thinks that's wrong, and why she thinks that the Handmaid's Tale would be dystopian fiction. So yeah, I read like a little bit of it during class today, but I want to read it again, just so it stays in my brain. Here we go. How did The Handmaid's Tale get written? The answer could be partly on a rented electric typewriter with a German keyboard in a walk-up flat in West Berlin, and partly in a small house in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, which, it was announced to me with a certain pride, is the per capita murder capital of the United States. Okay, I'm gonna leave the mouse here. Gosh, I said, maybe I shouldn't be here. Y'all don't worry. They only choose family. But although these two places provided, shall we say, a certain atmosphere, there is more to the story than that. The Handmaid's Tale, I must explain for the benefit of one person in the audience who may not have read it yet, out in paperback, and a bargain of creepy thrills for only $4.95, is set in the future. This cons some people into believing it is science fiction, which to my mind is not. It is not. I define science fiction as fiction in which things happen that are not possible today. That depend, for instance, on advanced space travel, time travel, discovery of green monsters on other planets or galaxies, or that contain various technologies that we have not yet developed. But in The Handmaid's Tale, nothing happens the human race has not already done at some time in the past, or that is not doing now, perhaps in other countries, or for which it has not yet developed technology. We've done it, or we're doing it, or we could start doing it tomorrow. Nothing inconceivable takes place, and the projected trends on which my future society is based are already in motion. So I think of The Handmaid's Tale not as science fiction, but as speculative fiction, more particularly as that negative form of utopian fiction that's come to be known as the dystopia. Utopia is usually thought of as fictional perfect society, but in fact the word does not mean perfect society, it means nowhere. That's true. In Latin, utopia just means nowhere. And was used sardonically by Sir Thomas. I'm going to look up what that means. Grimly mocking... Jesus, fuck, sorry for that voice crack. Grimly mocking or cynical. I'm sorry about that. That was crazy. Grimly mocking or cynical. Let me see more.
Sardonic.
Oh, my volume's down.
Sardonic.
Okay. Grimly... What the fuck? Mocking or cynical? Okay, I think I know what it means. So it was used sardonically by Sir Thomas More as the title of his own 16th century fictional discourse on government. Perhaps he meant to indicate that although his utopia made more rational sense than the England of his day, it was unlikely to be found anywhere inside of a book. Sorry. Both the utopia and the dystopia concern themselves with the designing of societies. Good societies for the utopias, bad ones for the dystopias. There is some of the same pleasure in this for the writer that we use to get as children when we built cities, or dinosaur jungles from plasticine, or drew entire wardrobes for paper dolls. But in utopia, you get to plan everything. The cities, the legal system, the customs, even facets of the language. The dystopian bad design is the utopian good design in reverse. That is, we the readers are supposed to deduce what a good society is by seeing in detail what it isn't. Okay, that is, we the reader are supposed to deduce what a good society is by seeing in detail what it isn't. Okay. Utopia dystopia as a form tends to be produced only by cultures based on monotheism. I'm going to look that up. Monotheism. Doctrine or belief that there is only one God. I see, okay. Or like Plato's system on a single idea of the good, and that postulate is a single goal-oriented timeline. Cultures based on polytheism and thus the circularity of time don't seem to produce them. Why bother trying to improve society or even visualize it improved when you know it's all going to go around again, like clothes in the wash? And how can you define a good society as opposed to a bad one if you see good and bad as aspects of the same thing? The Judeo-Christianity being a linear monotheism, one God, and one plotline, from Genesis to Revelation, has generated many fictional utopias and a good many attempts to create the real thing right here on Earth. The venture of the Pilgrim Fathers being one of them. We shall be as a city upon a hill, a light to all nations. And Marxism being another. In Marxism, history replaces a God as a determinant. And the classless society replaces the new Jerusalem, but changed through time, heading in the direction of perfection, similarly postulated. In the background of every modern utopia lurk Plato's Republic and the Book of Revelation, and modern dystopias have not been uninfluenced by various literary versions of hell, especially those of Dante and Milton, which in their turn go right back to the Bible, that indispensable source book of Western literature. Sir Thomas More's original Utopia has a long list of descendants, many of which I read as I hacked my way through high school, through college, and later through graduate school. This list includes Swift Gulliver's Travels and, in the 19th century, William Morris's News from Nowhere, in which the ideal society is kind of artist colony H.G. Wells' Time Machine, in which the lower classes actually eat the upper. Butler's Erewhon, in which crime is a sickness and sickness is a crime. And W.H. Hudson's A Crystal Age. Oh, okay, that's the end of the sentence. In our own century, classics are Huxley's Brand New World, Bellamy's Looking Backward, and of course, 1984, to mention. Utopias by women are also of note, though not as numerous. There are, for instance, Herlin by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, and Woman on the Edge of Time by Marge Piercy. Utopias are often satirical, satire being directed at whatever society the writer is currently living in. That is, the superior arrangements of the utopians reflect badly on us. Dystopias are often more like dire warnings than satires, dark shadows cast by the present into the future. They are what will happen to us if we don't pull up our socks. What aspects of this life interest such writers? To no one's surprise, their concerns turn out to be much the same as those of society. There are, of course, the superficial matters of clothing and cuisine, partial nudity and vegetarianism making regular appearances, but the main problems are the distribution of wealth, labor relations, power structures, the protection of the powerless, if any, relations between the sexes, population control, urban planning, often in the form of interest in drains and sewers, the rearing of children, illness and its ethics, insanity, ditto the censorship of artists and such like, riffraff and antisocial elements. Jesus Christ, dude, the list goes on. It is a characteristic of the extreme utopia at one end and the extreme dystopia at the other that neither contains any lawyers. Extreme utopias are communities of spirit in which there cannot be any real disagreements among members because all are of like and right mind. Extreme dystopias are absolute tyrannies in which contention is not a possibility. In utopia, then, no lawyers are needed. In dystopia, no lawyers are allowed. That's a good quote. I like that. In between, however, there is where most utopias, dystopias, as well as most human societies fall. And here, the composers of these fictions have shown remarkable fecundity. I'm going to look that up. Okay.
Fecundity.
Volume down again.
Fecundity.
Fecundity, okay. Ability to produce an abundance of offspring or new growth. Ability to produce many new ideas. Okay, I think it might be this one, guys. I think it might be that one. So here we are, okay. Relations between the sexes exhibit perhaps the widest range. Some utopias go for a sort of healthy-minded communal sex. Others, such as W.H. Hudson's Crystal Age, for an unlike arrangement in which most citizens are sexually neutral and only one pair per large country mansion actually breed, which is how they cut down on the birth rate. Still others, such as Marge Piercy's, allow men to participate almost equally in child rearing by allowing them to breastfeed via hormone injection. Oh, okay. An option that may not rejoice your hearts, but at least has the virtue of novelty. Then there's Huxley's ritualistic group sex and bottle babies, Skinner's boxes, and various minor science fictions written by men, I hasten to add, in which women devour their mates or paralyze them and lay eggs on them a la spiders. Sexual relations in extreme dystopias usually exhibit some form of slavery, or, as in Orwell, extreme sexual repression. The details then vary, but the utopia dystopia as a form is a way of trying things out on paper first to see whether we might like them, should we ever have the chance to put them in actual practice. In addition, it challenges us to re-examine what we understand by the word human, and above all, what we intend by the word freedom. I see. For neither the utopia nor the dystopia is open-ended. Utopia is an extreme example of the impulse to order. It's the word should ran rampant. Dystopia, its nightmare mirror image, is the desire to squash taken to inhuman and lunatic lengths. Neither are what you'd call tolerant, but both are necessary to the imagination. If we can't visualize the good, the ideal, if we can't formulate what we want, we'll get what we don't want in spades. It's a sad commentary on our age that we find dystopias a lot easier to believe in than utopias. Utopias we can only imagine, dystopias we've already had. But should we try too hard to enforce utopia, dystopia rapidly follows, because if enough people disagree with us, we'll have to eliminate or suppress or terrorize or manipulate them. And then we've got 1984. As a rule, utopia is only safe when it remains true to its name and stays nowhere. It's a nice place to visit, but do we really want to live there? Which may be the ultimate moral of such stories. Damn, okay. All this was by the way of background, to let you know that I'd done the required reading long before launching myself into The Handmaid's Tale. There are two other lots of required reading I'd like to mention. The first had to do with the literature of the Second World War. I read Winston Churchill's memoirs when I was in high school, not to mention a biography of Rommel the Desert Fox, and many other tome of military history. I read these books partly because I was an omnivorous reader and they were there. My father was a history buff, and these things were just lying around. By extension, I read various books on totalitarian regimes, not the present and the past. The one that sticks out was called Darkness at Noon by Arthur Koestler. This was not the only reading when I was in high school. I was also reading Jane Austen and Emily Bronte. I don't even know how to say that. And particularly lurid book of sci-fi called Donovan's Brain. I would read literally everything, and still will, when all else is lacking. I read airline in-flight magazines, and I have to say, I'm getting tired of those articles on billionaire businessmen. Don't you think it's time for some other kinds of fiction? This political area of my reading was reinforced later by travel to various countries where, to put it mildly, certain things we consider freedoms were not universally in force. And by conversations with many people, I remember in particular meeting a woman who had been in the French resistance during the war, and a man who had escaped from Poland at the same time. The other lot of required reading has to do with the history of the 17th century Puritans, especially those who ended up in the United States. At the front of The Handmaid's Tale, there are two dedications. One is to Perry Miller, who is a professor of mine at the dreaded Harvard Graduate School, and who almost single-handedly was responsible for resurrecting the American Puritans as field for literary investigation. I had to take a lot of this stuff, and I needed to, quote-unquote, fill my gap to pass my comprehensives. And this was one area I had not studied as an undergraduate. Perry Miller pointed out that, contrary to what I had been taught earlier, the American Puritans did not come to North America in search of religious or toleration, not religious toleration, or not what we mean by it. They wanted the freedom to practice their religion, but they were not particularly keen on anybody else practicing his or hers. Other noteworthy achievements were the banishing of so-called heretics, the hanging of Quakers, and the well-known witchcraft trials. Okay, heretic reference and also Quake reference in the same sentence. This is kind of peak. I can say these bad things about them because they were my ancestors, in a way. The Handmaid's Tale is my book about my ancestors, and the second dedication to Mary Webster is indeed to one of these very same ancestors. Mary is a well-known witch, or at least she was tried for witchcraft and hanged. But it was before they had invented the drop, which breaks your neck, that merely strung her up and let her dangle, and then they came to cut her down the next morning. She was still alive. Under the law of double jeopardy, you couldn't execute a person twice for the same crime, so she lived for another 14 years. I felt that if I was going to stick my neck out by writing this book, I better dedicate it to someone with a very tough neck. Puritan New England was a theocracy, not a democracy, and the future society proposed in The Handmaid's Tale has the form of theocracy too. I'm going to look up theocracy.
Theocracy.
Why? I never even muted at that time.
Theocracy.
Right, that's what I thought. System of government in which priests rule in the name of God or a god. Okay. Handmaid's Tale has the form of a theocracy too, on the principle that no society every strays completely far from its roots. Stalinist Russia would have been unthinkable without I'm not even going to try and say that. Russia to precede it, and so forth. Is it Tsarist? Is it just Tsarist? Tsarist Russia to precede it, and so forth. Also, the most potent forms of dictatorship have always been those that have imposed tyranny in the name of religion, and even folks such as the French revolutionaries and Hitler have striven to give a religious force and sanction to their ideas. What is needed for a really good tyranny is an unquestionable idea or authority. Political disagreement is political disagreement. But political disagreement with theocracy is heresy. And a good deal of gloating self-righteousness can be brought to bear on the extermination of heretics, as history has demonstrated. It's the Crusades, the forcible conversions of Islam, the Spanish Inquisition, the burnings at the stake under the English Queen Bloody Mary, and so on through the years. It was in the light of history that the American constitutionalists in the 18th century separated church from state. It's also in the light of history that my leaders in The Handmaid's Tale recombine them. All fictions begin with the question, what if? The what if varies from book to book. What if John loves Mary? What if John doesn't love Mary? What if Mary gets eaten by an enormous shark? What if the Martians invade? What if you find a treasure map and so forth? But there is always a what if to which a novel is the answer. The what if for The Handmaid's Tale could be formulated, what if it can happen here? What kind of it would it be? I've never believed any fictions about the Russians taking over. If they could ever get their refrigerators to work, they quite frankly wouldn't stand much of a chance. So that for me is not a plausible it. Or what if you wanted to take over the United States and set up a totalitarian government, the lust for power being what it is? How would you go about it? What conditions would favor you, and what slogan would you propose? What flag would you fly that would attract the necessary 20% of the population without which no totalitarianism can stay in power? If you propose communism, you'd be unlikely to get many takers. A dictatorship of liberal Democrats would be seen by the slightly dull-witted as a contradiction in terms, although many dubious acts have been committed. Let's face it, in the name of great God democracy, they've usually been done in secret, or with a good deal of verbal embroidery covering them up. In this country, you'd be more likely to try some version of Puritan fatherhood if you wanted to take over. That would definitely be your best plan. But true dictatorships do not come in good times. They come in bad times, when people are ready to give up some of their freedoms for anyone, who can take control and promise them better times. Bad times that made Hitler and Mussolini possible were economic, with some extra fills such as a shortage of men in proportion to women, due to the high death rates, including, I just spit all over my laptop, sorry, high death rates during the First World War. To make my future society possible, I proposed something a little more complex. Bad economic times, yes, due to a shrinking area of global control, which would mean shrinking markets and fewer sources of cheap raw materials, but also a period of widespread environmental catastrophe, which has had several results: a higher infertility and sterility rate due to chemical and radiation damage. This, by the way, is happening already. That's true. And a higher birth defect rate, which is also happening. Is that also happening? That's crazy. The ability to conceive and bear a healthy child would become rare and thus valued. And we all know who gets most in any society of things that are rare and valued. Those at the top. Hence my proposed future society, which in many human societies before it assigns more than one woman to its favorite male members. Yeah, my throat is itchy as fuck. Probably talking too fast. There are lots of precedents for this practice, but in my society, being derived from Puritanism would, of course, need biblical sanction. Luckily for them, Old Testament patriarchs were notoriously polygamous? Polygamous, sorry. Polygamous. Practicing related to, okay, well, what is polygamy? Whatever. Okay. Old Testament patriarchs were notoriously polygamous. Ugh, I've got hiccups now. The text they chose as their cornerstone is the story of Rachel and Leah, the two wives of Jacob, and their baby competition. When they themselves ran out of babies, they pressed their handmaids into service and counted the babies as their own, thus providing a biblical justification for surrogate motherhood, should anyone need one. Among these 5 people, not 2, the 12 tribes of Israel were produced. Woman's place in the Republic of Gilead, so named for the mountain of where Jacob promised his father-in-law Reuben that he would protect his 2 daughters, woman's place is strictly in the home. My problem as a writer was, given that my society has stuffed all women back into their homes, how did they go about it? How did you get women back into the home now that they're running around outside the home, having jobs and generally flinging themselves around? Simple. You just close your eyes, take several giant steps back into the not-so-very-distant past, the 19th century, to be exact, deprive them of the right to vote, own property, or hold jobs, and prohibit public prostitution in the bargain, to keep them from hanging out on the street corners. And presto, there they are, back in the home. Presto, I haven't heard presto in so long. To stop them from using their gold Amex cards to make quick airplane escapes, I have their credit frozen overnight. After all, if anyone's on computers and cash is obsolete, which is where we're heading, how simple to single out any one group. All those over 60, all those with green hair, all women. All the many scary features of my future society, this one seems to have gotten the most people. That their beloved, friendly, well-trained credit cards could rise up against them. It is the stuff of nightmares. This, then, is a part of the core of what I hope you will think is relentless logic running like a spine through the Handmaid's Tale. While I was writing it, and for some time after, I kept a scrapbook with clippings from newspapers, referring to all sorts of material that I fitted with the premises in the book, which was based. Everything with particles, high level of seaborne polar bears, the biological mothers, and SS troops by Hitler, in addition to their legal lives, prostitution. Oh, it's kind of blurry. So I'm reading in silence because reading out loud is hell. No offense. Polygamy in the state of Utah. I just said nothing constituted novel. Novel is always a story of an individual or several individuals, never a story of generalized mass. So the real problem is the writing of The Handmaid's Tale. The same problems involved in writing any novel. How to make a story real, a human individual. Pitfalls, utopian writing, story, and stuff. Disposition. The author gets too enthusiastic about sewage system paint belts. The story grinds to a halt with the beauties of those are explained. I want a factual and logical background to the main background. Did not want to uprise it forward. Okay, alright, that's it. Definitely gonna try reading in silence more often next time because like my throat got scratchy. I got the fucking hiccups. I started burping. It was not fun. Right, I'm just gonna do a little review of grammar now and syntax rules. This one's a little short, right? So, a basic structure of a sentence is you got the subject and you got the verb. Yeah, independent clauses. So independent clauses are like well, I'm just gonna read it. Okay, it's a complete thought. It can be standalone in a sentence, right? I went to the store. Right. The subject is I, and then the verb is went to the store. That works. The dependent clauses are such as like a reason to I went to the store because I was hungry, right? Because I was hungry, that's not, you can't have that stand alone. You need to have the independent clause first. Otherwise, it's an incomplete sentence. Right, signal words such as because, although, if, when, since, yeah, shit like that. Studying for hours but still feeling unprepared. Okay, so this is like, okay, is it a sentence or is it not? This one's not, right? Because there's no subject, first of all. I think that's it. There's no subject. The reason he missed the meeting. This one's just incomplete. It's just not a sentence. She studied for hours but still felt unprepared. This is a sentence. The subject being she. Verb study for hours, and then the dependent clause but still felt unprepared. Alright, yeah. You can join us at the cafe after class. That's a complete sentence. You, and then the verb is can join us at the cafe after class. Whenever they visit their grandparents in Montreal. Fake. That's not a real, it's an incomplete sentence. Compound and complex. Okay, I'm going to try and remember, right? Compound, I think compound is when it's two independent clauses in one sentence, and then complex is when it's a independent and dependent clause in one sentence. Called it! Yep. Finished my homework, and I watched a movie afterward. These can both be standalone, just without the and. But the and puts them together and makes them a compound sentence. Fuck you. I stayed home because I wasn't feeling well. Yeah, okay, yeah. Common mistakes. Okay, let's see. Comma splice. The concert was amazing. The band played all their best songs. One on sentences. I like coffee. Helped me stay awake in the morning. Right, yeah, okay, so comma splice, right? The comma splice means that this should just be a period. And then the next sentence would be like capitalize the T, make it a new sentence. This would be a compound sentence. I like coffee, and this should be a period here, period, new sentence here, helps me stay awake in the morning. You could argue that it isn't a good descriptor because if you just said it helps me stay awake in the morning, people don't know what you're referring to unless you say coffee before it. But it is a subject. It technically is a subject, so it is a complete sentence. Common punctuation. Okay. Comma. Okay. So we learned an acronym called fanboys. I'm gonna see if that's real. Yeah. It's real. Images. Oh wow. Okay. This is for like children. Who's that? Who's this? Who the fuck is that? Sorry. Right, I forgot to mention, like, this is, this seems, you guys probably think this, if you're watching this, you might think this is very, like, elementary, but you'd be surprised. I think they have this because, like, we just don't have a lot of, like, English-speaking students, or at least not full, like, Anglophone students, right? And there's a lot of stuff with, like, syntax and punctuation that's different in French than it is in English. But you know what? I'm going to admit that there's a lot of stuff here that I actually learned. Which is weird to say. I would have thought that I would have been taught something like this, like, in high school or before high school, but no. Fanboys is actually, this is, like, the first class I've never heard of fanboys until this class, which is, I don't know if that's embarrassing or if that's concerning for the education system that I went to. But yeah, okay, let's get back to it. For and, nor, but, or, yet so. Suck my dick. Right, so commas can always predate. What do you call that? Come before a fanboy. Right, so and is a fanboy. Period. Period is pretty simple. I don't need to explain that. Colon, right? Usually, for like if you're listing shit, but also you could put a colon before a quote. If you're directly quoting something, you could because a lot of people don't really know exactly how to transition from sentence to quote. So colon's a good practice. Semicolon. So I have a big test tomorrow. I can't go out tonight. So I think if it's two standalone, if it's two independent sentences that are like tightly related to one another, you could squish them together with a semicolon. And M dash, she opened the envelope and gasped at what she saw. I think this is kind of like a comma. Hold on, I'm gonna see if I can find something about that. M dash is a strong break in the sentence, adding emphasis. So it's a standard pause. Okay, so in other words, M dash is like a dramatic comma. Apostrophe. Okay, yeah, I know that shit. 10-minute break. All right, I'll see you guys in 10 minutes. So I didn't actually pause. I actually paused it for about a quarter of a second. Let's pretend it was 10 minutes, okay? Writing practice, fix sentences. Okay, this is an exercise we did during class. Pre-reading notes. Okay, end of notes, which means end of video because that's all I wanted to do tonight. Thank you. If you watch this for some reason, thanks, I guess. I don't know, man. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Tomorrow I want to study syntax and punctuation again. But also there's going to be another reading tomorrow. So stay tuned for that if you must. So yep, see you guys tomorrow. Bye.